Hello and welcome to day 4 of Wellbeing Week, presented by Allianz and the Australian Olympic Committee. I'm Amy Jones, a water polo Olympian, and so far this week we've covered a variety of topics, from career paths to finding your passion and embracing friendships. Today we're talking about an area that's very closely linked to wellbeing, and that's mental health. They really are two words that can conjure up so many feelings and emotions, yet despite the impact mental ill health is having on so many, it can still very much be an uneasy topic to bring up. The reality is, though, mental ill health doesn't discriminate. Some of the figures across the country are alarming. Up to 1 in 5 Australians will experience a mental illness in any year, and heartbreakingly, suicide continues to be one of the biggest killers of young Australians. It's not easy to talk about, but we need to open the conversation up. Today is RUOK Day, which aims to empower everyday Australians to be brave enough to have a conversation with someone who is struggling. My first guest today is no stranger to the highs and the lows of elite sport. She's a 3-time Olympian and has won multiple Olympic medals, which alone says a lot about her mental fortitude. She's gearing up for the Tokyo Games next year and is also an Allianz ambassador. Welcome to you, Cate Campbell.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Now, I wanted to check in. How are you managing this year with all of the curveballs that 2020 has thrown at you?
Yeah, I think that everyone will be pretty good at dodgeball by the time
I agree.
2020 is gone. Just when you think you've got on top of something, something else happens. So I think that we've all had to adapt, and we've all learned something about ourselves that we didn't know before. And for me, that's been quite a revelation. You know, I've had to reach into reserves that I didn't even know that I had, which at the time was horrible. But I know that when I face challenges in the future, that I feel more equipped to be able to deal with them.
So there's the silver lining, I guess, building up some resilience, if that's possible. I'm sure you have that in spades. Tell me about that day back in March, though, when you found out that pools were closing, things were locking down, the Olympics were being postponed.
I think you're referring to Monday, March the 23rd.
Yes, yes. You seem to remember it well.
Oh yes, I remember it quite well. At that stage, when I rocked up to training in the morning, the Olympics were still going ahead. Obviously I was at training, so facilities were still open. But everyone was a little bit distracted, like things were changing really rapidly. And so we were a bit distracted that morning, and our coach kind of sat us down and said, hey, I know that you're all really distracted, but as far as we know, the Olympics are still on. I need you all to go home, prepare, recover, and get ready to bring your A game tonight. Went home, and at 11 o'clock got a message from our coach saying they've closed all facilities. We've lost all access to all training facilities. So there will be no training tonight or until further notice. And then at 1 p.m, the news came in that we were not going to be sending a team to the Olympics, and they were going to be postponed, and at that point indefinitely. And it was just like, everything kind of lands on you all at once, and you've got so many emotions going around. You know, you've got disappointment, heartbreak, but then just uncertainty, which I think is something that people are still really grappling with.
Absolutely. And I'm guessing it was probably pretty important to be surrounded by the right people during that time. You moved in with friends, you went back to family?
Yeah. So 1 o'clock, the Olympics were postponed, and then at 3 o'clock it was announced that Queensland and New South Wales were shutting their borders. And I'm originally from Queensland. That's where my friends and family predominantly are based. And so I had this decision that we're heading into lockdown. Do I stay in Sydney or do I get back to Brisbane? I had 24 hours to decide that. So I packed a bag full of stuff, jumped to my car and headed across the border. And in retrospect, that was the best thing that I could have done, to be around your loved ones, particularly at that time. I mean, I know that we weren't able to go and visit people, but I was staying with a really good core group of friends, and my parents lived close enough that I could visit them on weekends. And for me, that really saved me during those 8 weeks of lockdown.
So even though you couldn't get in the pool, I hear you became the resident PT for your housemates. How important was that for you, for your mental health though, just to stay active during lockdown when you couldn't get in the water?
Yeah, I kind of went through a bit of a roller coaster when it was shut down. You know, when you're preparing for an Olympic Games, you are in the best shape of your life. I was doing 5+ hours of exercise, and once lockdown hit, I was like, right, I'm not losing any strength or any fitness. I found out within the first week that was an unrealistic goal. You can't do 5 hours of exercise by yourself. I didn't have access to a swimming pool. I didn't have access to a gym. And most importantly, I didn't have access to my squad or my coach. And I really found that that was such a huge motivating factor for me to be able to go out and enjoy my exercise and for it not to be a chore. So I wrangled my housemates. They left lockdown in the best shape of their life. I ran.
I'm sure they were grateful.
I think they were grateful to see the back of me by the end of it. By the end, they were like waving me off and all nursing some kind of injuries. But for me to have people there to hold me accountable, but then also just to make it a little bit more enjoyable was a real revelation. I come from an individual sport. I'm a swimmer, but having a squad and having a team around you really, really got me through.
Yes, I agree. Team sports, having a squad around, it does. It's great for motivation.
Yeah.
Now, I hear you took up some hobbies during lockdown. What did you get into and how did that, I guess, contribute to your feeling of well-being?
Yeah, so I think that I really felt disjointed during lockdown. This goal that I'd been working towards and striving for so long was taken away. But I also didn't have like little goals that I could set for myself along the way. Like there were no competitions on the horizon. Even in training, I set myself small goals in each session. Like I want to hit certain times or, you know, swim a certain number of kilometers. But all of that was gone. And so I was like, okay, well, your life for so long has revolved around swimming. What are the things that you've always wanted to do that you haven't been able to do because of swimming? Like, because all your energy has been taken up. So I tried a veggie garden. Lasted for a while until a possum came and ate it all. I got really into photography and would go out and photograph the sunrise every morning, which gave me a bit of a routine. Yeah, pretty much. Oh, and then furniture redecorating. That's actually one that I've really kept up.
Wow, very creative.
Yeah, well, everyone was going through and throwing out all their old furniture. So I was that creepy person walking along the side of the road being like, yeah, I'll take that. And then I'd take it home and found a love of Bunnings.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Yep.
Many people would agree, I'm sure.
Yes.
So it sounds like routine, like I know a lot of athletes are creatures of habit. We like routine, provides certainty, particularly during a really uncertain time. I'm keen to hear from you. You're heading into your 4th Olympics. That's incredible. How important has managing your mental health and putting some strategies into place meant that you have been such a long-term and high-performing athlete? Has that been just as important as the physical preparation?
Oh, for sure. I think that physical and mental well-being often go really hand in hand. I know that if I'm feeling good mentally, physically, I can get myself up for the challenge. If you know, every athlete is carrying injuries, and I feel like I can manage that if mentally I'm taking care of myself. And I think, you know, it's Are You Okay day today, and the whole point of today is to ask others, are you doing okay? But maybe something that we don't do enough, and I know that it's something that I've had to learn, is we don't stop and ask ourselves, am I okay? You know, and particularly athletes, we push through and you know, and we say, no, you know what, I'm going to hunker down, I'm going to knuckle down, I'm going to fight through this, instead of just for a second, like relaxing and opening up and taking a breath and saying, hang on, am I okay? And you know what? It's okay to not be okay. And if there's one reason to not be okay, I think a global pandemic's pretty good. So I definitely like stopped and asked myself that. And then when I wasn't, I could reach out to people. And I think that was really important.
That's such an important point, I think, just stopping to ask yourself, because as an athlete, you're a master of almost ignoring those signs that you're not.
You ignore the pain and you push through it. And mentally, you can only do that for so long before it all comes crashing down.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a wonderful job of getting through a really uncertain time. So thank you for having a chat. Please stick around. We will have some questions from everyone tuning in a little bit later today. Allianz is our Wellbeing Week partner this year, and they've recently launched a campaign aiming to help remove the stigma around mental health. Let's hear now from an Aussie surfer and guest later today who's aiming to make his Olympic debut in Tokyo, Owen Wright.
Fear is something that I didn't really register with prior to the head injury, and afterwards it was right in my face. If I wanted to go for a surf, I would be freaked out. If anyone has had panic attacks, you would understand that they grip your chest so tightly. That right, there's just fear, and that just rises up when you feel like you're in a situation that you're completely out of control. Those emotions can come up sometimes, and actually identifying them and working with them can be the key to actually releasing them.
I'd like to welcome our second guest today, who is an expert in the field of mental health and wellbeing. He's an associate professor at UNSW. Welcome, Dr. Simon Rosenbaum.
Thank you. Thanks
How
for
are
having
you?
me. Great.
Thank you for joining us. You have so much amazing knowledge in this area. I wanted to ask you, what is the link that you've seen between exercise, sport and wellbeing?
Yeah, sure. So I guess most of my work comes at it from the other spectrum, where we're looking at really vulnerable communities and how sport can be used in those communities to actually improve mental health. So an example being the Rohingya refugee crisis in Bangladesh, which is one of the biggest refugee camps in the world. Even in that context, sport is used by people to deal with stress, to relieve depression, relieve anxiety. So it's this universal transcultural thing. We turn to movement. When we move our bodies, we feel good. Interesting though, with athletes, we're talking the other end of the spectrum, where exercise is their job, being really physically fit. It's another level of participation that can have a negative impact on mental health at the same time.
Is there a happy medium there?
Ideally there is.
Where's the sweet spot between doing too much or not doing enough?
It depends on the person. So for example, an athlete, their job is to be in really high level of physical fitness. Probably what's interesting there is after their career and what happens then, and their relationship with exercise and how that changes, and how they can maintain a relationship with exercise that is positive, that actually promotes well-being, that is not a negative and a detrimental or a negative on their life.
I think a lot of athletes really struggle with that, because when you're a full-time athlete, an elite athlete training for an Olympic Games, it's your full-time job, and exercise is very performance-driven. So how do they recalibrate after they retire, and how do they find joy in movement again?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, and the idea, as you mentioned, joy in movement and enjoyment is one of the critical things. Whether we're talking to people that are sedentary and don't exercise, that are living with chronic illness or disability, or whether we're talking to an elite athlete, that enjoyment, it has to be there in order to get the most out of it. So I think for elite athletes, maybe after their career or they're transitioning, it's about finding the type of activity that they can enjoy and have a different relationship with, that isn't purely performance and competition. So I know that we've spoken before about the idea that if you've been a swimmer or something your whole life, and that it might be that after you retire you change to a different activity that you get something different from.
So it's about finding that thing that really makes you happy again, because I know for me, when I finished playing water polo, I couldn't get far enough away from a pool for a long time. I've come back to it now, but it took me a while. So I really had to find that thing that I enjoyed doing, that was activity that made me happy, which sounds like...
The enjoyment factor is absolutely critical, no matter who we're talking to. And I think that's the exciting thing about sport, is that it can create that passion, and it create that enjoyment for people beyond just the people that are actually playing. It's a whole community. People that are watching, people that are involved in support teams. Sport can really go a long way to actually improving physical and mental health of entire communities, not just the individual participant.
Can you explain a little bit more about that? Because you've been living in Bangladesh, you have a lot of experience working with communities. Can you talk more about the role of sport and exercise, not just on the people participating, but on everyone around them?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the really interesting things in Bangladesh was in the refugee camps was the power of sport in drawing a crowd. So in the refugee camp, and on days that we'd organise sport matches, or there'd be a sports match, you'd get hundreds of people coming to watch. There was a buzz around the camp that was different. It really, because the whole community could get involved, which was really exciting. I think the same thing's here in Australia, and it's here in other contexts, that it's, why does the Olympics draw such a crowd? Why does everyone get so caught up in it? And so I think we can harness that to actually do lots of good in communities around the world, particularly vulnerable communities. I think in that context, the issue is how do we engage the most vulnerable? So for example, people that don't have access, like women or people living with disabilities, how do we use sport in those environments to help those people? And
be a really positive force for good.
Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to focus back on athletes a little bit now, because it's a really tough gig being an athlete in terms of balancing your mental health and also that relationship with exercise. They also have this responsibility that in a lot of communities or Australia, Olympians are role models, and they're deemed to be superheroes and to be indestructible. Any advice for athletes about how they really balance their own well-being and that expectation?
It's a huge burden to carry. If you're obviously I'm not an athlete, I can't talk from experience, but I imagine it would be a huge burden to carry. And I think, we've got a lot of anti-stigma campaigns around mental health, which are fantastic, like RUOK Day. And I think they do a lot, but there is a bit of pressure at the moment, I think, on people in the public spotlight to actually tell their story and to share their own journey, which is fantastic. And that obviously can go a long way to inspire other people to want to share their journey. But I think it's important that athletes don't feel compelled to do that, and that they, they're not superhuman. They are vulnerable as well, just like the rest of us. And I think understanding that the job of an athlete by its nature is incredibly demanding. It's got these additional stresses that people in the general population don't experience. And their relationship with exercise is different as well. If your job is to train at elite level 6 or 7 hours a day, you're probably not going to experience the same benefits from that as someone else. So again, I think it comes back to what we spoke about earlier in terms of maybe swapping the relationship or trying to find a different type of activity that people can do. But I think the other critical thing is reaching out for help. We spoke before about the idea that, treating our mental health like our physical health. And often I've spoken to people that have maybe, tried to get mental health care and maybe didn't have a positive experience. But my response would be, if you have a bad massage, you don't then go, I'm never going to have a massage again. You find a different massage therapist or a different physio, however it is. The same thing needs to be there for our mental health. We need to think about it the same way. There's lots of help available. There's lots of different options. We need to surround ourselves with a team that can support the athlete's mental health in the same way they would have a team to support their physical health.
That's such a really good point you bring up about when you reach out, about finding the right person that you connect with and can talk to about that. For everyone, what would you say is the tipping point? Because some people might have down weeks or months, particularly this year. It's been such a tough year for just about everybody. At what point do you go from thinking, I'm feeling a bit down, I'm having a tough time, to I really need to reach out for professional help? Yeah,
it's tricky. There's no hard rule on that. I mean, the key thing that I would say is we know that early intervention and prevention is best. So the thing that I would stress the most is encouraging people to reach out early. Don't wait until there's what you think is an extreme problem. And we heard about athletes pushing through. That's what they're used to doing.
We're experts at that.
Of course, but we need to, this isn't the time. When we're talking about mental health, that's not the thing that people should be pushing through with. So reaching out for help early, again, making sure that they're surrounded with a team. And if you do have a bad experience, keep going, because there are other options available. There's online mHealth, there's apps, there's a whole bunch of support available that is backed by a whole body of scientific evidence. It can help. So there is help there. There is a reason to be optimistic. We just have to encourage people to actually reach out and to access that. And the more conversations that we have like this, that actually encourage people to do that and normalise that as an activity. If you break your arm or you break your leg, you can have a cast and that's fine. But it's kind of the similar thing. If you're experiencing a psychological injury, and we can think about it in those terms as well, you can recover, you can get better, and help is there.
Is that the best path to removing the stigma around talking about mental health or mental ill health? Is it normalising it?
Absolutely, that's a key part of it. We should be having these discussions, and I think again this is where athletes probably, particularly in Australia, when they are idolised, they do carry the burden of that, and stories around athletes' mental health is always, it always gets a lot of attention, and that would be tough for the athlete. But I think it goes a long way to inspiring the community to say, look, everyone is human, everyone experiences this. It's part of the normal human experience, really.
Yes, no, it's a fantastic point, and I really appreciate you sharing. That's some great advice there, Simon. Please stick around, because I know we'll have plenty of questions coming in for you in our live Q&A a little bit later. Well, if you're an Olympian watching this and looking for some guidance on how to develop your personal and professional goals, the Olympian Opportunities Program is a great place to start. Let's hear from Olympic rower Cameron Girdlestone about his experiences with the program.
Through the Olympian Opportunities Program, I gained the confidence that what I can be doing now, in and amongst my training, and still solely focused on going to Tokyo, I can use my time effectively now to help myself with the transition from being an athlete to career life. The big attraction to the Olympian Opportunities Program was the opportunity to have access to so many great resources that have been well researched. There's some very knowledgeable people a part of the program. You get assigned to an expert in the field. Their big question is, how can I help you? And these are past Olympians that have gone through the process and stepped through this process that you are about to step through when that time comes. I would strongly encourage you to sign up, have a read of it, because The resources are so well presented, it's easy to follow, and you'll gain so much confidence out of it. I truly believe it can help all athletes.
So whether you're in the midst of competing or retired, the program aims to assist you in different areas of your life. And just recently we added the financial literacy program, courtesy of Westpac. I'd like to welcome our next guest. He's currently one of the top 10 surfers in the world and is looking to make his Olympic debut in Tokyo next year. Owen Wright. Owen, welcome. You're joining us from the northern New South Wales, the Gold Coast, correct, where you're warming up for your first competition in a while. How's it been managing this year with all of the interruptions to competition and travel that you're used to?
It's been a bit of a juggle. There's been some great points already brought up today, and I definitely use some of those exact tips. It's like this has been like a semi going through retirement. You have to shift your goals as to why you're going to do physical exercise. Usually I've got quite a full-on training program throughout the day, and with no goals attached to it, it was hard for myself to get up and get into it. So I kind of had to reshift and rethink and reshape, and I started training for fun and adding in different elements to training that I usually wouldn't, just to mix it up and keep it fresh. I started surfing on surfboards that were not my typical shape. I surfed like old school boards and really just kind of connected back to my roots. But some of those points that the first brought up was really interesting, because I found myself almost in early retirement and not wanted retirement, but at the same time I had to go and learn all those little techniques and little like mental health and mental well-being techniques to basically continue through that little stage.
I wanted to ask you, Owen, about, you had a pretty serious injury back in 2015 at Pipeline. You suffered a head injury and you've come back from that. You're back to your peak form. What kind of strategies did you develop during that time coming back? Obviously you had to recoup your physical strength, but how did you recoup your mental strength, and what strategies have you been able to draw on this year?
Yeah, so I guess having the TBI, my physical body was in terrible shape. I wasn't able to do too much at all. So, and even my thinking capabilities weren't that great at all. But as the time went on, that was, quite a turbulent time. But once I got out of the, my brain was out of trauma, I still had a lot of fixing to do for the physical body and the brain. And that was a really slow process. That took about 3 to 4 years until that was totally fixed. But in that time, I shifted some of my focuses to other areas of my life, and my surfing wasn't where I wanted it to be, wasn't how my training, I couldn't train, I wasn't able to do those things for years, but I could surf, but really sporadically, only during competitions, maybe once or twice outside of competition. So I kept that quite a small part of my life, and then shifted my focus to other areas of my life. I had a young family. I had some great friends and, great support throughout the whole head injury that they really got shone a light on, because of how, they all of a sudden were right there and helping at every stage. So I got to really connect there, and also I put my brain to use for other areas of my life, trying to learn different skills outside of my sport, and at the same time just kind of waiting for that time period. There was always going to be a time period for how long it was going to take to recover from that head injury. So I got to learn a few things, from patience to, I felt the whole range of emotions, from to feeling really down about my sport and not being able to achieve the things I want to achieve or surf the way I want to surf, but I learned to shift and refocus. And I think that's kind of what helped during this time period. It all happened quite quickly, but just as quick as it happened, I found myself shifting just as quick back to things that I know there's more, what I felt was more fulfillment in for my mental health. It is a challenge to show up to training when there's no goal ahead of you or no event in sight. So I felt like that experience really helped me go through this time period of my life as well. And I think there's a lot of people out there going through something similar right now with their jobs, careers, you name it. There's been so much uncertainty, so much basically having to shift their lives. We heard Kate say she had to shift from, New South Wales to Queensland. And I think they're like really important decisions to really kind of make sure you pick, where's your value at and how are you going to navigate those times.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there, Owen, that during that time you turned to your family for support. How important was it to have the right people in your corner during that time and also this year?
Yeah, totally. That was really what got me through. I would come in from surfing and my body would be in quite a bad way in my head, and I could just shift to that family support and my young family, and having that around is so important. And even if you don't, there's always people there. There's always friends that care. There's always, and a lot of the times it's hard to see that, but they're there. And I think for me, having that accident, it really shown me who was there, and I don't hesitate to call now. I don't hesitate to pick up the phone. There's no hesitation in all those things, because I felt that sense of security with that strong support network. And that would be probably something that I urge other people to do as well, is don't be scared to pick up the phone and call that one person that you do feel that connection with.
I think that's a good lesson for us all. Owen, you've had the most amazing comeback since that injury, and last year you took out the Tahiti Pro at Chopu. What was the feeling like when you really got back to your peak and you were surfing as well as you ever had? How did it feel to have worked through all of that over the previous years and to get back there?
Yeah, that was a really intense emotion that came over me. I just passed all my physical examinations 2 weeks prior to that event, and I got the all clear. I was at about 94% brain health or something, and that's like where you pass the mark, and compared to other sport codes and things like that, and off you go. And so I was just really wrapped with that. But to go straight into Chopu, which is typically known to be very dangerous, and I've had concussions there before, and it was as big as it gets, and I got that win. I can remember just having this full emotion just rise up, and I just started crying. I felt the weight of how hard it was to go through all of that, how long I waited to be able to perform the way I wanted to perform, and then to execute 2 weeks out of being you're good to go. That just felt amazing. I loved it. It was a definite highlight in my career.
You are such an inspiration, Owen, and I know that so many people are looking forward to seeing you at the Olympics next year in Tokyo. What are you looking forward to most?
Oh, I can't wait for that opening ceremony. Hey, I just think the whole Olympic family and unit, and how everyone goes to watch each other, and I really like all the team sports. Being at that opening ceremony with everyone and walking in with everyone, I would love to do that.
I think you're spot on there. The opening ceremony was definitely a highlight for me too. Well, Owen, thank you for your time. Please stick around though. We have our live Q&A coming up very soon. It's Are You OK Day today, and this year the focus is that there's more to say after Are You OK? So if you want to check in with a friend, here are some tips on how to approach the conversation.
What do you do if you ask someone, "Are you okay?" and they say no? Any ideas? Anything? Hello? There's more to say after Are You OK? Take time to listen. Encourage them to take action or find support. And remember to check in to see how they're doing. Learn how to keep the conversation going at ruok.org.au.
The message there being that you don't need to be an expert to have a conversation and check in on a mate. Time now for our live Q&A. So if you're watching along and have a question for any of our guests, please add it to the comments section now. And we have quite a few questions to get through. I'm going to start with Ryan on Facebook. And Ryan would like to know, I'll throw this to both yourself, Kate and Owen. As athletes, you train every day to improve physically. Can you train to improve your mental health? What strategies and tips do you have? Kate, we'll start with you.
Oh, awesome question. Yes, there are lots of strategies and tips, and I think that often your mental health can get neglected, and that mental strength and resilience. For me, I am someone who really loves control and order. So how I challenge myself mentally is to put myself in really unfamiliar situations. And, you know, it's not challenging physically, but for my mental side and improving my ability to adapt under pressure or do things that I'm uncomfortable with, you know, it might be going to an event that you don't know anyone at and you have to, you know, meet people in the room. So doing those little things, I mean, we can't do that now, but, you know, little things that maybe challenge you more mentally or make you feel anxious. I know that when I feel a sense of anxiety that I'm getting close to my limits. And so I know, and I know really well when I've pushed too far and when to pull back. But it's finding comfort in the discomfort that allows you to grow, really. And that's what I've done.
Stepping out of that comfort zone. Interesting. Oh, and how about you? Any tips or strategies for improving, I guess, your mental strength?
Well, I've just recently changed. I had kind of coming out of that head injury, so I had a lot of repetition that helped me with my mental stability as such. But now coming out of that, I'm more on those same lines of what Kate's saying, is like I like to get a bit uncomfortable, throw new things in, see how I react, and get more uncomfortable with throwing different challenges at me each time I walk into the gym.
I like that too. All right, moving on to the next question. And Kate, this one's for you. It must be hard dealing with a 12-month delay until the next Olympics. How will you stay motivated until Tokyo in 2021?
Yeah, motivation has come up a lot just in, you know, people who I've been talking to. And something that I say is that motivation isn't a feeling, it's an action. And so if I had to wait to feel motivated, I would probably train once a week. But when my alarm goes off in the morning, I get up immediately. And just that small movement kind of begins a chain reaction. And taking that first step is often the hardest, but once you've started, you can continue quite easily. And like I mentioned, there are things that you can do to help with that motivation. So I have a squad waiting for me at the pool. If you're in lockdown in Melbourne, maybe connect with someone, have an exercise buddy that you make a designated time that you both jump online together and you both do exercise together, or you watch a movie together, or something that makes you feel fulfilled and happy. It's not about feeling motivated, it's about taking steps that will get you motivated. So yeah, I guess it's different for everyone, but yeah, I don't feel motivated most of the time.
It's relieving to hear, actually. Simon, I saw you nodding along there when Kate was talking about motivation being in action. Yeah. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important part, because even if we're talking about trying to motivate anyone, whether that's someone living with a mental illness or whether it's, you know, an athlete, that motivation has to come from within, like you're talking about. And when it comes to exercise and, you know, the mental health benefits, we can't just tell people go and exercise. That motivation has to come from within, and it has to be something that we help people to understand and appreciate, so that they actually decide this is something that they want to do and something that is beneficial for them.
Very interesting. I love that concept. Motivation does have to come from within, though. Next question. I'd love to hear from all of you on this. It's come through from Georgia on YouTube. We'll start with you, though, Owen. When you or someone you know is going through a tough time, what is the most useful thing your family and friends can do to support you? Over to you, Owen.
Yeah, I can just comment on how they were acting towards me during the time that I was going through a tough time with the head injury. And I noticed that they just popped over, see how I was going, or gave me a call, or just asked general chit chat. And it wasn't just always to like pry in or, you know, get to like some nitty gritty or anything. It was a lot of the conversations were just general about fun subjects, things that I liked and things like that. And so now on the flip side of that, I like to return the favour, and I just a lot of time just check on a lot of my friends and a lot of my family and just give them a call. And sometimes the conversation, you can get to some subjects that are really meaningful and can really be uplifting, and sometimes be so light and fluffy and you're just talking about all the funny stuff in life. So either way, I definitely go out of my way to kind of call my friends and just see how they're going.
So just making a connection, and it's so good to hear that you're repaying that favour now, I guess, after all the support you received. Simon, I'm interested to hear from you on this.
Yeah.
What's the best way that your friends and family support you?
Well, look, I mean, I just echo what Owen said earlier around, I mean, one of the strongest things we can do for people, and that includes in like a refugee camp, is to actually help people identify and utilise their existing support structures. It's one of the most powerful things we can do to actually prevent things from escalating or getting worse, because people do naturally have a lot of support available around them, and actually just helping them in a time where they're maybe struggling and you feel so alone and you feel so isolated, actually working with someone to help them identify what they do have available and their support can be hugely powerful. So I think that's something that we often take for granted, really, but that would be the key thing that I would say as well.
Is a support structure always someone?
Not
Can
necessarily.
it be something?
Not necessarily. I mean, we know that social connection is hugely important, and so having at least someone that you can turn to and identify, and that you can feel comfortable talking to. But also for some people, it could be exercise, it could be moving our body, it could also be looking after our sleep, looking after our diet. We know that those things are really important for maintaining mental health as well.
And Kate, how about yourself? What can people, family and friends, what's the best thing they can do for you?
I think the thing that was most helpful for me, particularly say in the weeks after the Olympics were postponed, is that they would just listen. I think that, you know, during that time I was trying to process everything and come to grips, and I would speak to some people and they'd say, oh, you know, that's really bad. But you know who has it worse? Like Jenny. Jenny has it worse. Her husband's stuck in Sierra Leone and she can't see him. And I was like, I know Jenny's got it bad, and I know that, you know, there are so many other people who also have it worse, but right now, like, I'm just hurting and I need to process that. And part of the way that I process it is I talk to other people, and it kind of gets it out and helps me normalize it and helps me accept it and helps me move on from it. And just being able to have someone sit with me and just say, I'm really sorry, Kate. This is a really hard time, but you're going to get through it. I know you are. You're strong, and I'm here. And then, you know what, we can chat about some other things. And if there's a little bit of gossip, I'll partake in that. Yes. You know, you can watch the reality TV shows and tell me about it, because I'm too ashamed to watch them myself, but I love hearing about them.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, sounds like having a sounding board is just really important. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Before we go on to our next question, I did just want to read out a comment that's come through from Nick on YouTube. For you, Owen. I feel for you, Owen. As a fellow TBI patient, the biggest help I found was to be able to refocus your goals and know that although there may now be physical limitations, we have an immense inner strength, and that we can all draw down on and lift ourselves out of what appears to be total darkness. We discover new ways of reaching our goals, which I think is a really lovely sentiment there. The next question has come through for you, Kate. Alicia on Facebook. For Kate, you've been to 3 Olympics. Tokyo will be your 4th, hurrah. What do you think have been the biggest lessons you've learned since Beijing 2008?
Oh my gosh, that's a long time ago now.
I know.
Wow.
Do agree on that.
Look, I think that it is the people who I have met along the way who have made the journey last as long as it has and made it as enjoyable as it has been. I was talking to a retired swimmer and she said, you know what? all the meets just kind of blur into one, and all your achievements blur into one. It gets to the point where you don't even remember your personal bests. But you know what you do remember? You remember the hugs and you remember the smiles. And I think that that is what is so good about sport, and why we love it so much is the people around you, and that community aspect, that community spirit, whether you're playing it, whether you're a part of it, whether you're watching it, whether you're a coach, whether you're a volunteer. You know, there are so many people who are working towards the same goal and have that same positive attitude and environment. And so I think that that's what's kept me in the sport for as long as it has, as I have been in the sport. You know, there've been immense ups and downs, and you know, my body's starting to wear out a little bit, but there's something about the people that just keeps drawing me back, and I hope to remain involved in sport long after I eventually hang up those togs for good.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, and I think that's one of the reasons we're all feeling a little bit disconnected this year, is because we haven't always been able to have our people around us, and they're so important. Last question I'd love to throw to you, Owen. How do you think competing at the Olympic Games will be different to the World Surf League? This has come through from Will on Facebook. What are your expectations around that, Owen?
I think obviously there's a big venue difference. A lot of the waves we go to are going to be on the World Tour, all the best locations you can pick around the world. At the Olympics, we're just so stoked to be in the Olympics, and the location closest is at Chiba. But the waves there are a lot smaller, and I think there's going to be some really radical surfing, and I think all the surfers are going to be really excited to be there. I know I'm going to be over the moon, but I think the competition level is going to be pretty intense. There's a different format. We have 5 surfers in one heat, which I've never done a heat like that ever. So there's some differences, and they're going to be really interesting to see how all the surfers react.
Well,
I can't wait to see how I perform.
I can't wait to watch surfing at the Olympics. I cannot wait. Thank you all for joining us today in Wellbeing Week. It's been so wonderful to hear from all of you. We really appreciate your time, sharing your experiences. I know everyone tuning in will have gained a lot. Thank you for tuning in to Day 4 of Wellbeing Week, where we've covered a lot in terms of empowering our mental health. If you do one thing today, make sure it's to check in with someone and ask them, are you okay? Sometimes the people who seem to be the strongest and coping the best are having the toughest time. We all need help from time to time, so don't be afraid to ask for it. If you are struggling and need assistance, here are some numbers you can contact. Most importantly, know that you're not alone. There are always people who can and want to help you get through anything, and being an athlete does not make you indestructible. Please tune in tomorrow to our final day of Wellbeing Week at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. We have a fantastic lineup of Olympians, including Paddy Mills, Sam Stosur, Kyle Vanderkuip and Yusuf Abdi. See you then.